The studio lights blazed down on the set of The View, where the audience buzzed with anticipation as the hosts took their seats for what promised to be another lively episode. Joy Behar, with her signature sharp wit and no-nonsense demeanor, settled into her chair, adjusting her glasses as she prepared to dive into the day's hot topics. Across from her, the guest of honor, Meryl Streep, entered with an air of effortless grace, her iconic smile lighting up the room as she waved to the cheering crowd. The conversation started innocently enough, touching on Streep's latest film project, a drama that explored themes of feminism and empowerment in Hollywood. Behar, ever the provocateur, leaned in with a sly grin and asked, "Meryl, you've played so many strong women on screen, but do you think today's actresses are too focused on social media fame rather than real talent?" Streep chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement, but there was a subtle edge to her response as she replied, "Well, Joy, talent isn't measured by likes or followers, it's about the craft, something I've dedicated my life to." The audience clapped, but Behar pressed on, her voice rising slightly as she countered, "Come on, Meryl, you're from a different era back when acting meant something more than TikTok dances and Instagram endorsements. Don't you think the industry has dumbed down?" Streep's expression shifted, a flicker of irritation crossing her face, but she maintained her composure, saying, "Joy, perhaps you're projecting after all. Talk shows like this thrive on sensationalism rather than substance." The tension began to build as Behar laughed it off, but the undercurrent was palpable, with co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg and Sarah Haynes exchanging uneasy glances. Streep, sensing the shift, decided to steer the conversation toward politics, a topic she knew Behar was passionate about, mentioning her support for certain progressive causes. Behar jumped in eagerly, "Oh, Meryl, you're such an icon for women's rights, but let's be real, some of your views on certain issues seem a bit out of touch with everyday Americans." Streep raised an eyebrow, her voice steady as she responded, "Out of touch, Joy, I've spent decades advocating for equality, while some hosts prefer to stir pots for ratings." The audience gasped at the subtle jab, and Behar's face reddened slightly, but she fired back, "Well, excuse me for keeping it real, not everyone lives in the ivory tower of Oscar wins." Streep smiled serenely, but her next words cut deep, "Keeping it real, Joy, your real often comes across as recycled opinions from yesterday's headlines." The exchange escalated, with Behar defending her stance on media influence, arguing that celebrities like Streep had a responsibility to stay grounded. Streep, unflinching, pointed out the hypocrisy in Behar's career, noting how talk show formats often prioritized conflict over meaningful dialogue. The crowd murmured in agreement with Streep, and Behar shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to regain control by changing the subject to Streep's personal life. But Streep wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her voice laced with quiet authority, "Joy, let's not deflect. Your questions reveal more about your insecurities than my career." The humiliation was beginning to set in as Behar stammered a response, the live audience sensing the power dynamic shift entirely in Streep's favor. As the segment continued, Streep masterfully turned every pointed remark back on Behar, exposing the host's tendency to interrupt and dominate conversations. Behar, usually the queen of comebacks, found herself floundering, her laugh sounding forced as Streep delivered line after line of poised rebuttals. The other hosts tried to mediate, but Streep's eloquence commanded the room, leaving Behar looking increasingly diminished. By the midpoint of the discussion, the viral moment was brewing, with social media already lighting up about the heated clash unfolding live on air. As the debate intensified on the set of The View, Meryl Streep's composure remained unshakable, a testament to her years of navigating Hollywood's toughest critics, while Joy Behar's frustration became more evident with each passing minute. Streep, drawing from her vast experience, began to dissect Behar's interviewing style, saying, "Joy, it's fascinating how you frame questions to provoke rather than enlighten, almost like a scripted drama, but without the nuance." Behar shot back, her New York accent thickening with defensiveness, "Provoke? That's called journalism. Meryl, not everyone sugarcoats like in your movies." The audience erupted in a mix of laughter and applause, but Streep's retort was swift and cutting, "Journalism, darling. This is daytime TV entertainment disguised as discourse. Whoopi Goldberg attempted to interject with a joke to lighten the mood, but the spotlight stayed firmly on the two women, their verbal sparring drawing every eye in the studio. Behar, unwilling to back down, pivoted to Streep's political activism, questioning her endorsements and implying they were more performative than genuine. "You march in protests, but do you really understand the struggles of the average person?" Behar challenged, her tone accusatory. Streep paused for dramatic effect, then responded with a measured smile. "Joy, I've portrayed those struggles on screen and lived through eras of real change. Perhaps you should try stepping out from behind the desk." The humiliation deepened as Behar's attempts to rally fell flat, with Streep effortlessly highlighting inconsistencies in Behar's past statements on similar issues. The co-hosts watched in stunned silence as Streep quoted a previous episode where Behar had praised a celebrity for the very thing she was now criticizing. Behar's face flushed, and she muttered, "That's taken out of context," but Streep pressed on, "Context is everything. Joy is something you seem to overlook when it suits your narrative." The live broadcast captured every nuance, from Behar's fidgeting hands to Streep's serene gaze, amplifying the sense of a masterclass in verbal takedowns. As commercials loomed, Behar tried to wrap up the segment gracefully, but Streep interjected one final time, "Before we go, Joy, remember, true strength isn't in shouting the loudest, but in speaking the truth." The audience roared with approval, leaving Behar to force a smile as the show cut to break. Post-break, the energy in the studio was electric, with whispers among the crew about the epic confrontation that had just unfolded. Streep, ever the professional, shifted gears seamlessly into promoting her film, but the undercurrent of the clash lingered. Behar, attempting to reclaim her poise, made a self-deprecating joke about getting schooled by the best, but it rang hollow against Streep's unflappable demeanor. The discussion veered back to lighter topics, yet the earlier exchange cast a long shadow, with viewers at home tweeting furiously about Streep's dominance. Analysts later would dub it a humiliation live on air, as clips circulated showing Behar's rare moments of speechlessness. Streep's words resonated beyond the studio, inspiring memes and think pieces on the power dynamics between hosts and guests. Behar, known for her resilience, would bounce back in future episodes, but this particular clash marked a memorable dent in her armor, all thanks to Streep's razor-sharp intellect. Returning from the commercial break on The View, the atmosphere was thick with unresolved tension from the pre-break clash between Meryl Streep and Joy Behar, as the hosts tried to steer the conversation toward safer waters. Streep, sensing the opportunity to elaborate, shared anecdotes from her career that subtly underscored her points, while Behar interjected with quips that now seemed more desperate than witty. "Meryl, you make it sound so easy, but not all of us have 3 Oscars to fall back on," Behar said, attempting humor, but Streep replied smoothly, "Oscars are nice, Joy, but integrity lasts longer, something worth aspiring to in any field." The audience's laughter favored Streep, and Behar's smile tightened as she realized the tide had turned irrevocably. Co-host Sarah Haynes tried to mediate by asking Streep about her preparation for roles, but even that led back to the core issue when Streep noted, "Preparation requires empathy, understanding perspectives beyond one's own, and unlike some formats that thrive on division." Behar bristled, countering with, "Division? This show brings people together through honest talk." Yet Streep's response was devastating. "Honest talk, or echo chambers? Joy, your honesty often silences differing views." The humiliation peaked as Streep recounted a story from her early days, drawing parallels to current media landscapes, effectively painting Behar as part of the problem. Viewers could see Behar's discomfort in her body language, shifting in her seat and glancing at the clock, while Streep remained the picture of poise. The segment dragged on with Behar trying to pivot to audience questions, but even those seemed to side with Streep, one fan asking how she handles critics like Behar. Streep laughed genuinely, with grace and facts. "It's all about rising above." Behar's retort fell flat, and the co-hosts rushed to conclude, but not before Streep delivered a parting shot. "Joy, perhaps next time, let's discuss without the heat. After all, clashes are for scripts, not real conversations." As the show wrapped, the backstage buzz was all about the live humiliation, with producers scrambling to manage the fallout. Social media exploded with hashtags like #Streep vs Behar and #Meryl Masterclass, clips going viral of Streep's eloquent dismantling. Behar, in interviews later, would downplay it as spirited debate, but the consensus was clear. Streep had emerged victorious, her words echoing as a reminder of class and confrontation. The episode's ratings soared, proving that such clashes, while uncomfortable, captivated audiences hungry for authenticity amid polished TV facades. In the aftermath of the heated exchange on The View, Meryl Streep's words lingered like a well-delivered monologue, while Joy Behar struggled to regain her footing in the eyes of the audience both in studio and at home. Streep, transitioning effortlessly, shared insights on mentorship in Hollywood, but wove in subtle critiques of media personalities who prioritize controversy. "Mentorship is about lifting others, not tearing them down for views," she said, her gaze briefly meeting Behar's, who responded with a forced chuckle, "Well, Meryl, not everyone can be as perfect as you." Streep's reply was calm yet piercing. "Perfection isn't the goal, Joy. Authenticity is, something that can't be faked even on live TV." The co-hosts, sensing the ongoing undercurrent, tried to inject levity, but the damage was done. Behar's usual dominance had been eclipsed by Streep's superior rhetoric. As the discussion evolved, Behar attempted a comeback by questioning Streep's choice of roles, implying some were outdated. "Your characters are strong, but do they reflect modern women?" Behar probed. Streep smiled. "Modern women come in all forms. Joy, perhaps broaden your view beyond the desk." The audience applauded wildly, and Behar's expression soured, her humiliation compounding with each affirming cheer. Streep then turned the tables, asking Behar about her own career inspirations, forcing the host into a defensive stance that revealed vulnerabilities. "I started in comedy, fighting for my spot," Behar admitted, but Streep interjected gently, "And yet, here you are, using that spot to challenge rather than champion. A food for thought." The live broadcast captured the raw emotion, with cameras zooming in on Behar's rare moments of hesitation. Post-show analyses praised Streep's strategy, likening it to her Oscar-winning performances where subtlety wins over bombast. Behar, in a bid to salvage, wrapped the segment with thanks, but Streep's final words sealed the deal. "Thank you, Joy. This has been enlightening for all of us." The studio erupted, leaving Behar to ponder the encounter long after the lights dimmed. Reflecting on the climactic moments of the clash on The View, Meryl Streep's unyielding poise contrasted sharply with Joy Behar's mounting exasperation, turning what could have been a standard interview into a legendary takedown. Streep elaborated on her views with anecdotes that highlighted the evolution of entertainment, while Behar's interruptions grew more frequent but less effective. "Interrupting doesn't make one right, Joy. It just shows impatience," Streep noted calmly, eliciting nods from the audience. Behar retorted, "Impatience? This is passion, Meryl, something your polished demeanor might lack." Streep's laugh was genuine as she replied, "Passion without purpose is just noise, darling." The humiliation was evident in Behar's reddening cheeks and faltering comebacks, as Streep dismantled each argument with facts and finesse. Co-host Whoopi tried to diffuse with humor, but the focus remained on the duo's dynamic, with Streep emerging as the voice of reason. As time wound down, Behar pushed one last point on celebrity influence, but Streep countered masterfully. "Influence is earned through actions, not assertions as something to remember in your line of work." The episode concluded amid thunderous applause for Streep, leaving Behar to smile through gritted teeth. Online, the video spread like wildfire, with commentators hailing Streep's class and Behar's rare defeat. Wrapping up the unforgettable episode of The View, the echoes of Meryl Streep's eloquent humiliation of Joy Behar resonated through the studio and beyond, cementing it as a pivotal moment in daytime TV history. Streep, in her closing remarks, emphasized unity over division, a subtle nod to the clash's origins. Behar, attempting recovery, quipped about learning from the best, but Streep's response was the final nail. "Learning is lifelong, Joy. Glad I could contribute." The audience's ovation was deafening, underscoring Streep's triumph. Post-show, discussions dissected the exchange, praising Streep's grace under fire and noting Behar's uncharacteristic vulnerability. The script of their dialogue became fodder for parodies and analyses, highlighting how a simple interview escalated into a masterclass in verbal artistry. Ultimately, the clash served as a reminder that even seasoned hosts can be outmatched by true icons like Streep.